The morning sun filtered through the windows of Riverside Cafe, painting golden stripes across the worn wooden floors. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls just pulled from the oven. It was the kind of Miami morning that promised everything and nothing, where the air hummed with possibility and the city seemed to hold its breath before the chaos began. Laura Bennett moved between the tables with practiced grace, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that swung with each step. At 26, she had mastered the art of the smile that said, "Welcome," without promising too much, the kind that made regulars feel seen and strangers feel like they belonged. Her uniform was crisp despite the early hour, her sneakers silent on the floor as she balanced 3 plates of eggs and toast like she'd been born doing it. "Morning, Mrs. Carter," she said, sliding a plate in front of the elderly woman who'd been coming here for 15 years. "Extra butter on your toast, just how you like it." The old woman nodded without looking up from her phone, already scrolling through whatever indignation the internet had served her that morning. Laura didn't mind. She'd learned long ago that kindness didn't require acknowledgement to be worth giving. The cafe was filling up with the usual Thursday crowd. Construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts. Office workers stealing a few minutes of peace before fluorescent lights and spreadsheets claimed their day. Young mothers with strollers, grateful for anywhere that would tolerate the chaos of toddlers. This was Laura's kingdom, small and humble as it was, and she ruled it with warmth and efficiency. She was pouring coffee for table 7 when she heard the sound. A small, sharp scream, the kind that freezes a room mid-breath. "There's a monster!" The voice belonged to little Emma Rodriguez, 5 years old and normally fearless. But now she was pointing at the floor near the window booth, her eyes wide with the kind of terror only children can muster for the truly terrible. Laura turned, coffee pot still in hand, and saw it. The cockroach was enormous, not the small, skittering kind that Miami residents learned to tolerate as part of urban life. This was different. This was a creature that seemed to have crawled from some prehistoric swamp, all antenna and armor, bold and unashamed in the morning light. It moved across the floor with the confidence of something that knew it shouldn't be there and didn't care. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed nervously. Mrs. Carter looked up from her phone with the expression of someone who just found her purpose for the day. And then the cockroach did something that sealed everyone's fate. It spread its wings. Laura didn't think. Thinking would have required acknowledging what she was about to do, and acknowledgement would have stopped her. Instead, she acted on pure instinct, the kind that bypasses logic and goes straight to survival. She jumped, not away from the cockroach, not towards safety, but directly into the lap of the customer who just walked in and taken a seat at the nearest table. He caught her. That was the thing she'd remember later, in the quiet moments when she replayed this scene in her mind. He didn't push her away or freeze in shock. His arms came up automatically, steadying her weight, holding her like it was the most natural thing in the world to have a waitress launch herself into his personal space at 8:30 on a Thursday morning. For 3 heartbeats, the world stopped. Laura found herself staring into the most remarkable pair of brown eyes she'd ever seen. They were the color of coffee with just a splash of cream, warm and deep and currently filled with equal parts surprise and amusement. The man's face was all sharp angles and strong lines, the kind of handsome that came from good genetics and probably expensive skincare, though Laura wouldn't have bet money on which dominated. He smelled like cedar and something else she couldn't name, something clean and expensive and completely out of place in Riverside Cafe. "Do you usually do this with all the customers?" His voice was low, with just a hint of laughter running underneath it like a current. Laura's brain came back online in stages. First, the awareness that she was sitting in a stranger's lap. Then the heat flooding her cheeks. Finally, the crushing embarrassment that made her want to melt into the floor and disappear. "Only with the ones who look like they won't scream louder than me," she managed, and was proud that her voice only shook a little. She should have moved, should have scrambled off him and apologized and pretended this was all somehow normal. But his arms were still around her waist, steadying her, and she found she didn't quite want to move yet. Not when his eyes were looking at her like that, like she was something worth looking at, like this absurd moment was somehow the best part of his morning. Someone cleared their throat. The spell broke. Laura jumped up, smoothing her uniform with shaking hands. "I am so sorry. It's just, it had wings. I swear it spread its wings and it was huge." The man stood, graceful despite the interruption to his morning. He was tall, she noticed. Tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He wore jeans and a simple white shirt, but they fit him the way expensive clothes did, like they'd been waiting their whole existence just for him. He picked up a newspaper from the adjacent table, folded it with precise movements, and approached the cockroach with the air of someone accepting a challenge. One swift movement, one decisive sound. Silence. The threat has been neutralized, he said, looking back at her with a smile that did something complicated to her heartbeat. The cafe erupted in applause. Someone whistled. Mrs. Carter actually put down her phone to clap. Wow, Laura said and meant it. You just won over half the female customers here. And the other half? He was still smiling, and Laura realized with a start that she was smiling too, that her face hurt from smiling, that she couldn't remember the last time a smile had felt this effortless. The other half are still processing that I just jumped into a stranger's lap over a bug. He laughed then, a real laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. For what it's worth, it was a very aggressive bug. Thank you. She said it simply, meaning it for more than just the bug. Meaning it for the way he'd caught her, for the way he was looking at her now, for making this mortifying moment feel like something else, something better. Coffee? She asked because she had to say something, and that was safe. Please. She poured it with hands that had finally stopped shaking. He didn't leave a name for the order, didn't ask for hers, just sat there drinking his coffee and occasionally glancing her way with that same small smile. When he left 20 minutes later, he put down a $20 bill for a $4 coffee and walked out without looking back. Laura stood there holding the money, watching the door swing closed behind him. What was that? Sofia Martinez appeared at her elbow, eyes wide with the kind of excitement that came from witnessing something that would fuel break-room gossip for weeks. I have absolutely no idea, Laura said. But she was smiling. The phone call came the next morning. Laura had spent the previous evening trying to forget the cockroach incident with limited success. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those brown eyes looking at her with amusement, felt those arms catching her, heard that laugh that seemed to reach inside her chest and rearrange something fundamental. It was ridiculous. She was 26 years old, not 16. She'd been in relationships before. She knew better than to spin fantasies out of a single moment with a stranger. But her brain didn't seem to care about logic. So when her phone rang at 7 in the morning, displaying the cafe's number, she answered with a sense of relief. Work was safe. Work was real. Work would crowd out these silly daydreams. Laura, I need you to come in early. Mr. Thompson's voice was flat, emotionless. The voice of a man who'd made a decision and wasn't going to be swayed by anything as inconvenient as feelings. Of course, is everything okay? Just come in. The line went dead. Laura dressed quickly, her stomach already churning with an anxiety she couldn't name. Mr. Thompson wasn't warm, but he was fair. He didn't call people in early to chat. He didn't use that tone of voice for anything good. The cafe wasn't open yet when she arrived. The chairs were still upside down on the tables, the floor clean from the night before's mopping. Everything looked the same as it always did. Everything felt different. Mr. Thompson was in his office, a room barely big enough for a desk and 2 chairs, made smaller by the towers of receipts and invoices that seemed to multiply when no one was looking. Sit down, Laura. She sat. The chair was hard plastic, the kind meant to discourage long conversations. I got 3 phone calls yesterday, he said. No preamble, no easing into it, just straight to the point, like ripping off a bandage. 3 customers, all complaining about what happened with the cockroach. Laura felt her stomach drop. Mr. Thompson, I can't explain. It was just a reflex. I wasn't thinking, and the customer didn't seem to mind. He was actually very nice about it. That's not the point. He wasn't looking at her, was studying the papers on his desk like they held the secrets of the universe. Mrs. Carter has been coming here for 15 years. She said it was inappropriate, unprofessional, said she felt uncomfortable. Mrs. Carter feels uncomfortable about everything, Laura said, then immediately regretted it. Desperation was making her sharp when she needed to be soft. That may be true. Mr. Thompson finally looked up, and Laura saw something in his eyes that looked almost like regret. Almost, but not quite enough. But she's a paying customer, and so are the other 2 who called, and I can't afford to lose 3 regulars because of 1 incident. The words hung in the air between them. Laura heard them, understood them, but her brain refused to process their meaning. You're firing me, she said it flatly. A statement, not a question. I'm sorry, Laura, you're a good worker, but I have to think about the business. The thing about losing your job is that it happens so fast. One moment, you're a productive member of society with a place to go every morning and a purpose to fulfill. The next, you're collecting your things from a locker, saying goodbye to coworkers who look at you with pity and relief that it wasn't them, walking out a back door because you can't face going through the front. Laura sat in her car for 10 minutes before she could make herself turn the key. A cockroach. She'd lost her job over a cockroach. The laugh that escaped her throat sounded wrong. Too high. Too sharp. The kind of laugh that lived on the border between humor and hysteria. She drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning through a catalog of disasters. Rent was due in 3 weeks. She had $1,200 in savings. Her resume was good but not great. The job market was tight. Competition was fierce. She was unemployed. Again. Sophia was waiting when she got home, alerted by some sixth sense that people who've been best friends since college develop. She didn't say anything, just opened her arms. Laura walked into them and let herself cry. "I'm going to murder Mrs. Carter," Sophia said when Laura finally pulled away, mascara streaked and eyes red. "Get in line," Laura said, and found she could still smile. Barely, but it counted. "We'll figure this out," Sophia said. "You always do." Laura wanted to believe her. She really did. The call. 2 days of resume sending later, Laura had learned several things. 1, the job market was even worse than she'd feared. 2, her savings were going to last exactly 6 weeks if she was very, very careful. 3, instant ramen was going to feature heavily in her immediate future. She was staring at her laptop, debating whether to apply for a position that required 3 to 5 years experience, when she only had 2 when her phone rang. Unknown number, probably spam. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Is this Laura Bennett?" The voice was female, professional. The kind of crisp enunciation that suggested expensive education and even more expensive dental work. "Yes, this is she. My name is Rachel Morrison. I'm calling from Ashford Industries. We have an opening for an administrative assistant in our marketing department, and your profile caught our attention." Laura's brain stuttered, stopped, rebooted. "I'm sorry, I think there's been some mistake. I don't remember applying to Ashford Industries." A pause, then, "Sometimes resumes come through referral channels. Are you interested in the position?" Yes, of course. Can you tell me more about it?" What Rachel described sounded like a dream. No, better than a dream. Dreams didn't come with $4,500 monthly salaries and full health benefits and performance bonuses. Dreams didn't include working for one of Miami's most successful investment firms. Dreams didn't happen to waitresses who'd just been fired for jumping on customers. "Would you be available for an interview tomorrow? 2 p.m. Absolutely." Laura's hand was cramping from how hard she was gripping the phone. "Can I ask, how did you get my resume?" Another pause, this one longer. "As I mentioned, sometimes we receive referrals from various departments. The important thing is whether you're interested in the opportunity." It should have been suspicious, should have raised red flags, should have made Laura pause and question and investigate. But desperation has a way of making even the strangest gifts look like providence. "I'm very interested," Laura said. "Excellent. I'll email you the details. We look forward to meeting you, Miss Bennett." The line went dead. Laura sat there, phone still pressed to her ear, wondering if she'd just imagined the entire conversation. "Sophia," she yelled. "Sophia." Her roommate appeared in the doorway, hair wrapped in a towel, looking concerned. "What? What happened?" "I think I just got the weirdest job interview of my life." By the time she finished explaining, Sophia's concern had transformed into something between excitement and suspicion. "This is either amazing or a scam." "That's what I'm thinking." "But you're going to go anyway." "Oh, absolutely." They looked at each other and started laughing. The kind of laughter that comes from stress and hope and the absolute absurdity of life. Laura spent that evening researching Ashford Industries. The company was massive. Investment portfolios spanning multiple industries, real estate development across 3 states, revenue in the hundreds of millions. The CEO was Daniel Ashford, 30 years old, considered one of Miami's youngest self-made success stories. The official photo on the company website showed a man in a perfectly tailored suit, his expression serious and professional. Laura squinted at the image, trying to make out features that were deliberately obscured by distance and formal lighting. "Probably never worked a day in his life," she muttered to Sophia, who was reading over her shoulder. "These rich kids always pretend they built everything themselves. Never mention the trust fund or the connections." Bitter much? Sophia said, but she was smiling. Just realistic. But despite her cynicism, Laura couldn't help the flutter of hope in her chest. Maybe this was her chance. Maybe losing one job had opened the door to something better. Maybe, for once, the universe was on her side. Ashford Industries occupied 30 floors of one of Miami's newest glass towers. The lobby alone was larger than Laura's entire apartment, all marble and steel, and the kind of aggressive minimalism that screamed money. The receptionist looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, her smile professional and utterly devoid of warmth. Laura smoothed her blazer for the 10th time, suddenly conscious of how off the rack it looked in this environment. Her shoes were sensible pumps from a discount store. Her bag was faux leather that fooled no one. She was a carefully constructed facade of professional competence, and she had a feeling this building could see right through it. The elevator to the 15th floor was silent, fast, the kind of smooth ascent that probably cost more than her monthly salary. She watched the numbers climb and tried to remember how to breathe. Rachel Morrison met her with a firm handshake and a warmer smile than the receptionist had managed. She was 40-something, dressed in a way that suggested she knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone's approval. Laura liked her immediately. "Welcome to Ashford Industries," Rachel said. "Let me show you around." The marketing department was open concept, all glass walls and collaborative spaces, and the hum of focused work. Everyone looked young, competent, like they'd been born knowing how to create pivot tables and interpret analytics. "This would be your workstation," Rachel said, gesturing to a desk that was somehow both sleek and functional. The computer looked brand new. The chair looked ergonomic. Everything looked like it cost more than Laura's car. "It's amazing," Laura said, because it was true and because she couldn't think of anything else to say. The interview itself was straightforward. Rachel asked about her experience, her goals, her availability. Laura answered honestly, trying not to oversell herself, but also not to undersell. It was a balance she'd never quite mastered. "When could you start?" Rachel asked finally. "Immediately," Laura said, then worried she'd sounded too desperate. "I mean, I could start as soon as you need me." Rachel smiled. "How about Monday?" Monday would be perfect. They shook hands again. Laura walked back to the elevator in a daze. She had a real job, a bond that paid triple what the cafe had paid, with benefits and opportunities for advancement and a view of the Miami skyline that made her heart hurt. She was going to be okay. The elevator doors opened on the 15th floor. Laura stepped out, planning to grab some water from the break room before she left. She'd seen it on the tour, all gleaming appliances and complimentary snacks that seemed too good to be real. She turned the corner and collided with someone carrying a large box. "I'm so sorry," she started to say, then looked up. The world stopped. It was him, the man from the cafe, the one with the brown eyes and the easy smile and the way of catching falling waitresses like it was something he did every day. "You," she said, because her brain had apparently decided to stop forming complete sentences. "Laura," he said, and the fact that he remembered her name did something complicated to her chest. "You work here?" She was staring. She knew she was staring. Couldn't seem to stop. He shifted the box in his arms, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. Something that might have been guilt or calculation or both. But then he smiled, and it was the same warm smile from the cafe, and Laura felt her doubts evaporate. "Yeah, a few years now, supply management, organization, that sort of thing." Supply management. So he was in logistics, operations, one of the invisible people who kept big companies running. It made sense. He had the calm competence of someone who solved problems without needing recognition for it. "I just got hired," Laura said. "Marketing assistant." "That's great. Congratulations." He seemed to mean it, seemed genuinely happy for her. "Guess we'll be seeing each other around." "Guess so." They stood there, neither quite willing to walk away first. The hallway felt too small suddenly, too warm. Laura was hyper-aware of everything, the way he was looking at her, the faint smell of cedar that she remembered from before, the fact that her heart was doing things hearts weren't supposed to do in professional environments. "I should," he gestured with the box. "Right, yes, of course." He walked past her, and she caught herself turning to watch him go, caught herself smiling like an idiot. This was bad. This was very, very bad. She worked here now. He worked here. Office romances were messy and complicated and almost always ended in disaster. But when she got back to her car, she was still smiling. Sophia took one look at her face when she got home and groaned. "Please tell me you didn't." "Didn't what?" "Fall for someone at your new job. Tell me you did not fall for someone on your first day. I didn't fall for anyone, Laura said. Then, at Sophia's skeptical look, okay, maybe I'm slightly interested in someone, but it's fine. It's totally fine. I'm a professional. Sophia just shook her head. This is going to be a disaster. Probably, Laura agreed, but she was still smiling. The discovery. Daniel Ashford sat in his corner office on the 30th floor and wondered when exactly his life had become a romantic comedy. Marcus Chen, his assistant and the closest thing he had to a best friend, was staring at him with the expression of a man watching a car crash in slow motion. Let me get this straight, Marcus said. You've arranged to hire a woman you met once. You're planning to pretend to be a regular employee, and you think this is somehow going to end well. When you say it like that, it sounds questionable, Daniel admitted. That's because it is questionable, sir. Daniel hated when Marcus called him sir in that particular tone. It was the tone that meant Marcus was right, and they both knew it, and Marcus was enjoying rubbing it in. I just want to know if she'd like me for me, Daniel said. Not for the money or the position or any of that, just me. Marcus softened slightly. They'd been friends since college before Daniel had inherited his mother's struggling startup and turned it into an empire. Marcus had seen the parade of women who'd been interested in Daniel Ashford, CEO, and completely uninterested in Daniel Ashford person. I understand, Marcus said. I do, but this isn't a movie. She's going to find out. And when she does, she's going to feel deceived. Because she was deceived. I'll tell her, Daniel said. Soon, just not yet. Marcus sighed. Your funeral. But he helped anyway. Set up a temporary desk in the supply area near the marketing department. Covered for Daniel when board meetings ran long, and his alter ego was supposed to be organizing inventory. Watched with the resignation of a man who'd signed up for a business partnership and gotten a soap opera instead. Daniel changed into jeans and a casual shirt in the executive bathroom, leaving his suit jacket and tie hanging on the back of his office door like a discarded identity. He took the stairs down to the 15th floor, bypassing elevators where employees might recognize him. It was absurd. It was adolescent. It was the best decision he'd made in years. Because when he saw Laura at her desk, absorbed in learning the company's project management software, he knew. Knew with a certainty that bypassed logic and went straight to something deeper. Something true. This was worth the risk. She was worth the risk. Even if Marcus was right, even if it ended badly. Some things were worth the fall. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel learned things about Laura Bennett that the hiring file hadn't mentioned. That she hummed under her breath when she was concentrating. That she took her coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. That she had a laugh that started quiet and built to something glorious. That she was kind to everyone, from the CEO who nobody knew was watching to the janitor who emptied the trash cans at night. He learned that she dreamed of starting her own consulting business. That she wanted to help small companies, the kind that couldn't afford the big firms. That she believed in people more than she believed in profit, which made her either incredibly naive or incredibly brave, and Daniel suspected it was both. They started having lunch together, nothing formal, just coincidental meetings at the break room that turned into walks to nearby food trucks. Daniel discovered Miami through her eyes, saw the city he'd grown up in transformed into something new, something better. You've really never had Cuban food from a truck? Laura asked, biting into a sandwich with the kind of joy usually reserved for much more expensive meals. I guess I always went to restaurants, Daniel said, which was true. He just left out the part about those restaurants having Michelin stars and 6-month wait lists. This is so much better than restaurants, Laura declared. This is real food, made by real people. No pretension, no trying to be something it's not. Daniel looked at her, sauce on her chin and happiness in her eyes, and thought about pretension, about trying to be something he wasn't. You're probably right, he said quietly. She caught something in his tone, looked at him with sudden concern. Hey, you okay? Yeah, he smiled, meaning it. Actually, I'm better than okay. And he was, despite the deception, despite knowing it couldn't last, despite Marcus's increasingly dire warnings. He was happy. The problem with happiness is that it makes you careless, makes you forget that reality has a way of catching up to even the best-intentioned lies. The problem came 6 weeks in, on a Thursday that started like any other. Laura had been promoted. Her proposal for reorganizing the customer service workflow had saved the company $200,000 annually. Rachel had called her in, offered her a new title and a significant raise, and Laura had floated through the rest of the day like she'd sprouted wings. Daniel had taken her to dinner to celebrate, not anywhere fancy, a small Italian place with plastic tablecloths and house wine, and the kind of food that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it. They talked until the restaurant closed, until the owner started giving them pointed looks, until Daniel realized he'd never wanted a night to end less. Walking back to her car, Laura had asked him a question. Daniel, what if someone you cared about lied to you about something big? His heart had stopped. Actually stopped. What do you mean? Just hypothetically, like if they lied about their job or their past or something important, how would you feel? I guess it depends why they lied, he'd said carefully. Does it though? She'd looked at him then, her eyes serious in the streetlight. I mean, honesty is everything. Big lies destroy relationships, don't they? He'd wanted to tell her then, wanted to say that he wasn't who she thought he was, that he was sorry, that he'd been a coward and he knew it, but the words wouldn't come. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the office to find Marcus waiting with a calendar reminder. Board meeting, 11 a.m., marketing department presentation on customer service restructuring. Daniel's stomach dropped. Tell me Laura isn't part of that presentation. Marcus's expression said everything. You have to cancel, Daniel said. I can't cancel a board meeting, sir. The Japanese investors are flying in specifically for this. Then I won't attend. The board is already asking questions about your availability. If you miss another major meeting, they're going to start investigating why. Daniel looked at his schedule, looked at the disaster looming on the horizon, looked at Marcus, who was trying very hard not to say, I told you so. There has to be a way out of this. There isn't, Marcus said, not unkindly. I'm sorry. At 10:55, Rachel called Laura's desk. Emergency. I need someone to run these documents to the CEO. Japanese investors can't wait. Laura grabbed the folder, didn't question it, didn't hesitate, just ran for the elevator, checking her appearance in the mirrored walls as she rose toward the 30th floor. She'd never met the CEO, never even seen him in person, but she'd heard he was young and ruthless and brilliant. The kind of person who inspired both admiration and fear in equal measure. The executive floor was different from the rest of the building. Quieter, more expensive. The kind of space that announced its importance in every detail. She found the right door. Knocked. Heard nothing. Rachel had said it was urgent. Had said to go straight in. Laura turned the handle. The conference room was full of men in suits that cost more than her car. At the head of the table, leading the presentation with absolute confidence, stood Daniel. Not Daniel, the supply coordinator. Not Daniel, who ate food truck sandwiches and walked on the beach and made her laugh. Daniel Ashford, CEO. The man whose signature was on her paycheck. The man she'd been criticizing for 6 weeks to his face, not knowing. The folder slipped from her hands. Papers scattered across the floor like snow, like confetti at a funeral. Every eye in the room turned to her. Daniel's face went white. Laura, he said, just her name. Just like a prayer or an apology or both. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but back away, shaking her head, the word no forming on her lips even though no sound came out. Laura, wait, please let me explain. But she was already running, down the hallway, past startled assistants, into the elevator where she stabbed the lobby button with shaking fingers. She heard him calling after her, heard him telling people to postpone the meeting, heard the desperation in his voice. She didn't care. The lobby, the parking garage, her car. She fumbled with her keys, dropped them, picked them up with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Laura! He'd followed her, was running toward her across the concrete, still in his executive clothes, looking like a stranger. Don't come near me, she said. Her voice sounded wrong, broken. Don't you dare come near me. He stopped, stood there in the harsh fluorescent light of the parking garage, breathing hard. You lied, she said. The words felt like they were being torn out of her chest. You lied about everything. I never lied about how I felt, he said desperately. Everything between us was real. The only thing that wasn't real was my job title. She laughed. It came out wrong, harsh, the kind of sound that had sharp edges. Your job title. Right. Such a small thing. Just the fact that you're my the CEO, the billionaire who let me criticize him for weeks because he thought it was funny. I didn't think it was funny. I thought you were brave, honest. Everything I wanted but couldn't find anywhere else. So you decided to lie to me, to deceive me, to make me look like an idiot. No, he said fiercely, never that. I just wanted you to know me, the real me, without the money and the power and all the things that make people see me as a transaction instead of a person. But I don't know you, Laura said, and the truth of it hit her like a physical blow. I know a fiction. A character you were playing. I fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. The words hung in the air between them. Fell in love. Present tense. Because despite everything, despite the anger and the hurt and the betrayal, it was still true. She loved him. And that was the worst part. He does exist, Daniel said quietly. I'm him. I'm the same person who ate those sandwiches with you, who walked on the beach and talked about dreams and made you laugh. The money doesn't change who I am. Yes, it does, Laura said. It changes everything. And you knew it would. That's why you lied. She got in her car. He stood there, not trying to stop her, just watching with an expression that would have broken her heart if it wasn't already in pieces. She drove away without looking back, made it 3 blocks before she had to pull over because she couldn't see through the tears, made it home somehow. Sophia took one look at her face and pulled her inside without questions. And Laura cried. For the relationship that never was. For the man who didn't exist. For the fool she'd been to believe in fairy tales. Behind her in a parking garage that smelled like exhaust and broken promises, Daniel Ashford stood alone. The CEO, the billionaire, the most powerful 30-year-old in Miami. And for the first time in his adult life, completely powerless to fix what he'd broken. The sunrise over Miami was the color of a fresh wound. Laura watched it through her bedroom window, eyes burning from a night without sleep. She'd cried until there were no tears left, until her chest ached and her throat was raw. Now she just felt empty, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that mattered. Sophia had stayed with her through the worst of it, had brought tissues and ice cream and words that were meant to comfort but couldn't reach the place where the hurt lived. Around midnight, when Laura finally stopped shaking, Sophia had asked the question, "What are you going to do?" Laura had looked at her laptop, at the resignation letter she'd already typed, at the decision that felt inevitable. I can't see him every day, she'd said. I can't walk into that building and pretend everything is fine. Can't sit at that desk knowing he's 30 floors above me. Can't. Now, in the gray light of morning, that certainty remained. She dressed in clothes that felt like armor. Black pants, white shirt, the kind of outfit you wore when you needed to disappear into yourself. The office was quiet when she arrived, early enough that only the dedicated were present, the ones who came in before dawn to prove something to someone, maybe themselves. Laura's desk looked exactly as she'd left it, computer sleeping, coffee mug still half full from yesterday, a plant that someone from the design team had given her as a welcome gift. It had only been 6 weeks. How could 6 weeks feel like a lifetime? She started packing. Her belongings fit into a single cardboard box, a sweater she'd left in her drawer, the coffee mug, a framed photo of her and Sophia from college, the plant which deserved better than to be abandoned. Laura? Emily from the design team appeared in the doorway, her expression confused. What are you doing? I'm leaving. What? Why? Did something happen? How to explain? How to put into words the feeling of your world tilting sideways? Of discovering that the foundation you'd been building on was made of lies? Personal reasons, Laura said, because it was true and because it was all she could manage. Emily looked like she wanted to press, wanted to understand, but something in Laura's face must have warned her away. We're going to miss you, she said instead. You were good at this, really good. Laura smiled. It felt like her face was cracking. Thank you. Rachel found her in the hallway. Laura had hoped to avoid this conversation, had planned to leave her resignation letter on Rachel's desk and disappear before anyone could stop her. My office, Rachel said, not a request. The small room felt smaller with the 2 people in it. Rachel closed the door, sat down, gestured for Laura to do the same. I'm assuming this is about Mr. Ashford, Rachel said quietly. Laura's head snapped up. You knew? I hired you, didn't I? Rachel's smile was sad, knowing. He called me the day after you were fired from the cafe, said he'd heard about an excellent candidate who might be looking for work, asked me to reach out. I ran your resume through the normal channels, and you were legitimately qualified. But yes, I knew. The betrayal was fresh, sharp. Everyone knew, everyone except me. Not everyone, just a few of us, and for what it's worth, I've worked for Daniel Ashford for 8 years. I've seen him ruthless in business, cold in negotiations, but I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you." Laura wanted to throw something, wanted to scream, wanted to explain that it didn't matter how he looked at her if the entire foundation was built on deception. Instead, she just stood, placed her resignation letter on Rachel's desk. "I'm sorry," Laura said, "for leaving suddenly, for any inconvenience." Rachel didn't try to stop her, just nodded, accepted the letter. "For what it's worth, you would have been great here. You are great. Don't let this make you forget that." Laura left through the back stairwell, couldn't face the elevator, couldn't risk running into anyone else who might want to talk or comfort or explain. The parking garage was cold despite the Miami heat. Her car looked small and sad in the shadows. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before she could make herself turn the key. Somewhere above her, Daniel Ashford was probably in his corner office, probably looking at his city, his empire, everything he'd built. She wondered if he was thinking about her. She wondered if it mattered. The days after blurred together into a gray mass of rejection emails and dwindling bank accounts. Laura applied to everything. Marketing positions she was overqualified for, administrative roles that paid half what she'd made at Ashford Industries, retail jobs that made her chest tight just thinking about standing for 8 hours. Each application felt like throwing messages in bottles into an ocean that had no shore. The responses, when they came, were uniform in their politeness. "Thank you for your interest. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. We'll keep your resume on file." The kind of language that meant nothing and communicated everything. Her savings account displayed numbers that dropped like a countdown timer. 1,200 became 1,100 became 900. Rent was due in 2 weeks, then 1 week, then 3 days. Sophie had offered to cover it, had stood in the kitchen with her checkbook open and her expression determined. "Just until you get back on your feet," Sophia had said. "That's what friends do." Laura had wanted to accept. God, how she'd wanted to. But pride is a strange thing. It keeps your back straight even when everything else is bending. Keeps you saying no thank you when every practical bone in your body is screaming, "Yes, please." "I'll figure it out," Laura had said. Sophie had put the checkbook away without comment, but her eyes said everything her mouth didn't. The fifth interview was at a small marketing firm in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation office. The owner was a woman named Carla Thompson, 50-something with tired eyes and a kind smile that had weathered too many disappointments. "I can offer you $2,000 a month," Carla said, and she sounded apologetic about it. "No benefits, no 401k, but the work is good. We help local businesses, the kind that can't afford the big firms." It wasn't enough. 2,000 wouldn't cover rent and food and student loans and the 100 other expenses that added up when you were trying to survive. It wasn't even close to enough. "When can I start?" Laura asked. Carla's smile widened, became something genuine. "Monday?" "Monday's perfect." That night, Laura allowed herself one moment of weakness. She pulled up Daniel's contact in her phone. Her thumb hovered over the call button, hovered and shook, and finally retreated. What would she even say? "I miss you" felt too vulnerable. "I hate you" felt too complicated. The truth was she felt both and neither and everything in between. She deleted his contact instead. It didn't make her feel better, but it felt like doing something, like taking control of the one small piece of her life she could still manage. Across the city, in a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that cost more than most people made in a year, Daniel Ashford was discovering that money couldn't buy sleep. He tried everything: melatonin, meditation apps, counting sheep that turned into Laura's face every time he closed his eyes. Nothing worked. Every time he drifted toward unconsciousness. He saw her expression in that conference room, saw the exact moment her world broke, saw himself reflected in her eyes, transformed from someone she loved to someone she couldn't look at. Work became his refuge. 16-hour days, 18, 20, anything to avoid the silence of his apartment. The board noticed, started making comments about his availability, his focus. The Japanese investors had been understanding about the canceled meeting, but understanding only stretched so far. "You look terrible," Marcus said, appearing in Daniel's office doorway at 2 in the morning. "Thanks. When's the last time you slept?" Daniel looked at his computer screen, at the spreadsheet that was somehow both vital and completely meaningless. "Sleep is overrated." "So is martyrdom," Marcus said. He came in without invitation, sat in the chair across from Daniel's desk. "Talk to her." She doesn't want to talk to me. Have you tried? Daniel had tried, had called 17 times, had sent 12 texts, had driven past her apartment twice before realizing how creepy that was and forcing himself to go home. Each attempt had been met with silence, the kind of silence that was louder than screaming. She made herself clear, Daniel said. Then make yourself clear back, Marcus said. Tell her why you did it. Tell her you're sorry. Tell her you're an idiot who made a stupid choice for complicated reasons. I did tell her in the parking garage. She didn't want to hear it. Then tell her again, Marcus said, and again. And keep telling her until she listens or tells you to stop. But don't just sit here drowning in guilt. That helps nobody. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to explain that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was leave someone alone, that sometimes love meant respecting when you weren't wanted. But he was so tired. And Marcus was right. Martyrdom was overrated. What should I do? Daniel asked, and he sounded as lost as he felt. Marcus smiled. It was gentle, understanding, the smile of someone who'd watched his friend self-destruct before and knew the signs. Start with flowers. The flowers. The first bouquet arrived on Monday morning. Lara had been at Sunshine Marketing for approximately 45 minutes. Long enough to meet the small team. Long enough to be shown her desk, which was less a desk and more a folding table with a computer that took 5 minutes to boot up. Long enough to wonder what she'd gotten herself into. Then the delivery person appeared. Laura Bennett. That's me. The daisies were enormous. The kind of arrangement that took up half her workspace. White and yellow, and so beautiful they hurt to look at. There was no card. Secret admirer? Natalie from accounts said, leaning over to inhale the scent. Something like that, Laura said. She knew who they were from. Daisies were her favorite. She'd mentioned it once, in passing, during one of those long conversations when you share pieces of yourself without thinking about what you're giving away. He'd remembered. Of course he'd remembered. The flowers should have made her angry. Should have felt like manipulation or bribery or one more way he was using his money to try to fix what money couldn't fix. Instead, they just made her sad. Tuesday brought sunflowers. Wednesday, yellow tulips. Thursday, white roses. Friday, orchids that looked like they cost more than her weekly salary. Still no cards. Still no messages. Just flowers. Day after day. Each one a reminder that someone was thinking about her. That someone was sorry. That someone didn't know any other way to say it. This is either the most romantic thing I've ever seen or the creepiest, Sophie said, surveying the apartment that had started to resemble a botanical garden. I'm leaning toward creepy, Lara said, but she was arranging the orchids in a vase as she said it, was making sure they had water and light and everything they needed to survive. You could call him, Sophie suggested carefully, tell him to stop. Then they would stop, Lara said, and that's a problem because? Lara didn't have an answer, or rather she had an answer she didn't want to examine too closely, because the flowers made her feel less alone, because they were proof that she'd mattered to someone, even if that mattering had been built on lies, because some wounded part of her wasn't ready to cut that last thread connecting her to a version of herself that had been happy. Across town in a flower shop that had come to know him by name, Daniel placed his daily order. Same address? The florist asked. Same address. She hasn't called to thank you, the florist said. It wasn't a question. Daniel had been coming in every morning for 5 days, had spent more on flowers than most people spent on rent. The florist was kind enough not to mention that this was either dedication or delusion. Possibly both. I know, Daniel said. Sometimes the grand gestures don't work, the florist said gently. Sometimes people just need space. I know that too, Daniel said, but I have to try something. The florist nodded, began assembling another arrangement. What about a card this time, something personal? Daniel thought about it, thought about all the words trapped in his chest that couldn't find a way out, thought about how inadequate language felt when trying to repair something this broken. Just one word, he said finally. Sorry. The next morning's flowers came with a small white card. 2 words handwritten, I'm sorry. Lara held the card for a long time. Read those 2 words until they stopped meaning anything. Until they were just shapes on paper. Until her hands stopped shaking. She tucked the card into her purse. Didn't throw it away. Didn't display it either. Just kept it close. A talisman or a wound. Maybe both. The destruction. Victoria Sinclair had spent 3 weeks watching Daniel Ashford fall apart. She'd known him for years. Had watched him build his empire with cold precision. Had seen him negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. Had never, not once, seen him look the way he looked now. Haunted, hollow, like someone had reached inside and removed something vital. It was fascinating and infuriating because Victoria had spent 2 years trying to get Daniel to look at her the way she'd heard he looked at that waitress, had attended charity galas in dresses that cost more than cars, had positioned herself at every social event, every business function, everywhere she thought he might be, had dropped hints that ranged from subtle to about as subtle as a freight train. Nothing, not a flicker of interest, not a moment of consideration, but some nobody from a cafe, some girl with no connections, no money, no breeding. She got the full force of his attention, got him lying to his board, skipping meetings, looking like a lovesick teenager. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. It needed to be fixed. Victoria's family had been wealthy once, the kind of old Miami money that opened doors and ensured respect and made life a smooth glide from cradle to grave. Then her father had made some spectacularly bad investments. Then the housing market had collapsed. Then the lawsuits had started. Now the Sinclair fortune existed mostly in carefully maintained appearances, designer clothes bought on credit, jewelry pawned and repurchased in careful rotation, a mansion mortgaged 3 times over. The kind of wealth that was really poverty with better staging. Victoria needed to marry money, needed it the way drowning people need air, and Daniel Ashford had been her best prospect. Her only prospect, really. The other eligible bachelors in their social circle could sense desperation the way sharks sensed blood in water. She couldn't let some waitress ruin everything. The private investigator came recommended by a friend who'd used him during her own messy divorce. He was discreet, thorough, expensive in a way that made Victoria's remaining credit cards weep. "I need everything on Laura Bennett," Victoria said, sliding a folder across the desk. The investigator barely glanced at it. "What kind of everything?" "The kind that's useful." He named a price that made Victoria's stomach clench. She agreed anyway. Desperation made people do expensive things. The report came back 3 days later. It was disappointingly clean. No criminal record, no secret addictions, no scandalous past, just a normal woman who'd had some bad luck and was trying to survive it. "This is useless," Victoria said, flipping through pages of mundane details. "She's clean," the investigator said with a shrug. "Some people are just boring." Victoria sat in her car outside the investigator's office, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. There was supposed to be something. Some weakness she could exploit. Some secret that would make Daniel see this girl for what she really was. A gold digger, an opportunist, someone unworthy of his attention. If there was no scandal to discover, Victoria would have to create one. The plan formed slowly, carefully, with the kind of attention to detail that Victoria usually reserved for charity auction seating charts. She started with research. Learned that Laura now worked at Sunshine Marketing. Learned the names of her coworkers. Learned that one of them, Natalie, had posted on social media about needing money for her mother's medical bills. People in need were so much easier to convince. The meeting happened at a cafe 3 blocks from Victoria's house. Natalie arrived looking nervous, hopeful, the kind of desperate hope that meant she'd probably agree to anything. "Thank you for meeting me," Victoria said, her smile warm and conspiratorial. "I have a proposition that might help us both." She laid it out carefully, made it sound reasonable. A small favor, some casual conversation with coworkers. Just a few mentions of things she'd heard about Laura Bennett's past, nothing too dramatic, nothing that could be traced back to either of them. "I don't know," Natalie said, but she was already wavering, already counting the money Victoria had mentioned, already thinking about medical bills and rent and all the ways $5,000 could change her life. "Think about it," Victoria said. "No pressure, but the offer expires Friday." Natalie agreed on Thursday. The poison spread the way poison does. Slowly at first. A comment here, a whisper there. Nothing that could be pinned down or proven false. Just suggestions, implications. The kind of gossip that grew in the dark spaces between certainty and doubt. "Did you hear about Laura's last job? Something about inappropriate behavior with a customer." "Yes, apparently she was fired." Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of person would do that? And then more carefully planted. "I heard she was seeing someone wealthy before she came here. Someone said it ended badly. Something about blackmail?" "I don't know. I'm just saying what I heard." By the end of the week, the atmosphere at Sunshine Marketing had changed. Conversations stopped when Laura entered rooms. People looked at her differently, with suspicion, with judgment, with the kind of quiet condemnation that didn't need evidence to feel righteous. Laura noticed, of course, she wasn't blind, but she couldn't understand it, couldn't trace the shift to its source, could only watch as the small world she'd built began crumbling around her for the second time in a month. "Did I do something?" she asked Carla, who'd been avoiding eye contact all morning. Carla looked uncomfortable, trapped between her own sense of fairness and the weight of rumors she didn't quite believe but couldn't quite dismiss. "People are talking," Carla said finally, "about your past, about why you really left your last job." "I left because my boss lied to me," Laura said, "because I found out he was the CEO pretending to be someone else. That's the truth. That's all of it." Carla looked like she wanted to believe. But belief required courage, and courage was expensive when clients were calling with concerns. The first client canceled on Wednesday, then two more on Thursday. By Friday, Sunshine Marketing had lost half its accounts. "I'm sorry," Carla said, and she was crying, actually crying. "I can't afford to lose any more business. I have to let you go." Laura sat in the small office that smelled like coffee and failure, heard the words, processed them, felt something inside her that had been cracking finally break clean through. "What did people say I did?" she asked. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else, somewhere far away where this wasn't happening. "It doesn't matter," Carla said. "It does to me." So Carla told her. The rumors, the whispers, the picture they painted of someone Laura didn't recognize. A manipulator, a liar, someone who used people and discarded them. Laura walked out of Sunshine Marketing for the last time, got in her car, drove with no destination in mind, just away. Away from the judgment and the lies and the feeling that someone was systematically destroying her life. She ended up at the beach, sat in the sand as the sun set, watched families pack up their umbrellas and couples walk hand in hand along the water. Her phone rang. "Sophie." "Someone is doing this to me," Laura said when she answered. "Someone is spreading lies, destroying everything." "Who?" Sophie asked. "Who would do that?" "I don't know," Laura said, "but I'm going to find out." She didn't know that across the city, Daniel was asking the same question. The investigation. Marcus found Daniel in his office at midnight, staring at his computer screen with the kind of intensity usually reserved for discovering the secrets of the universe. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. "Reading," Daniel said. He didn't look up. Marcus came closer, saw the screen filled with social media profiles, search results, the digital footprints of someone trying to piece together a mystery. "What are you looking for?" "Answers," Daniel said. Then finally looking up, "Something's wrong. Laura was fired again. I heard it through Rachel, who heard it from someone else. 2 jobs in 6 weeks. That doesn't happen by accident." "Maybe she's just having bad luck," Marcus suggested, though his expression said he didn't believe it. "No," Daniel said. "Someone is doing this to her. Someone is systematically destroying her reputation. And I need to know who." By morning, Daniel had hired the best private investigator in Miami. By afternoon, he had a name. Michael Torres arrived at Daniel's office with a messenger bag and an expression that suggested he'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. He laid out his preliminary findings with the efficiency of someone who did this regularly. The rumors started at Sunshine Marketing, approximately 1 week after Ms. Bennett began working there. Initial source appears to be a woman named Natalie Chen, accounts payable. "Why would someone in accounts payable care about Laura?" Daniel asked. "She doesn't," Michael said, "or didn't, until she was approached by someone offering money to spread specific information." He slid a photo across the desk. "Recognize her?" Daniel looked at the image, felt his stomach drop. "Victoria Sinclair." "Old friend?" "Not exactly." Daniel rubbed his face, tried to process what he was seeing. "She's been pursuing me for years. We were never." "She thinks you should have been," Michael said, "and she blames Ms. Bennett for the fact that you weren't interested." He laid out more documentation, bank records, text messages, a paper trail that painted a picture of systematic harassment. "Can we stop her?" Daniel asked. "We can threaten legal action, defamation, harassment. Depends how far you want to push it." Daniel thought about Laura, about the expression she'd worn when he'd last seen her, about adding more drama, more publicity, more reasons for her to hate him. "I want to stop her without involving Laura," he said. "Can you do that?" Michael smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I can do that." The confrontation happened at Victoria's favorite restaurant, the kind of place where lunch costs more than most people's car payments and everyone knew everyone else's business. Daniel arrived in a suit that cost what Victoria spent on rent, sat down across from her without preamble, slid a folder across the white tablecloth. "What's this?" Victoria asked, but her smile was already faltering. "Evidence," Daniel said, "of what you've been doing to Laura Bennett." He watched her face cycle through reactions. Surprise. Calculation. The dawning realization that she'd been caught. "I don't know what you're talking about," she tried. Daniel opened the folder. Let her see the bank records, the text messages, the witness statements Michael had collected. "Yes, you do," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of calm that was more frightening than shouting. "You paid Natalie Chen $10,000 to spread lies about an innocent woman. You contacted Sunshine Marketing's clients with fabricated concerns. You systematically destroyed Laura's life because you were angry I wasn't interested in you." Victoria's face had gone pale. "Daniel, I can explain." "Don't go on," he said. "Just listen. You have two choices. You can stop immediately. Contact everyone you spoke to, retract everything you said, issue a public apology, or I can take this to the police and every newspaper in Miami. Your choice." "You wouldn't," Victoria said, but she didn't sound certain. "Test me," Daniel said. He stood, buttoned his jacket, looked down at her with a something that might have been pity if it had been softer. "You have 24 hours. After that, I've filed charges." He left her there, didn't look back, didn't care if she was crying or angry or planning revenge. He'd done what he needed to do. Now he needed to tell Laura. Writing the letter took Daniel 6 hours and 23 attempts. Words that felt right in his head looked inadequate on paper. Explanations that seemed clear came across as excuses. Apologies that felt genuine read as hollow. Finally, at 3 in the morning, he stopped trying to make it perfect. Started trying to make it true. The courier delivered it on Saturday morning. Laura almost didn't open it, saw the handwriting, felt her heart do something complicated, almost threw it away. But curiosity was stronger than caution. Or maybe hope was stronger than fear. Either way, she opened it. The letter was long, detailed. It explained everything about Victoria, about the investigation, about the evidence in the confrontation and the retractions that were already being sent. But it was the last part that made Laura's hands shake. "I'm not telling you this to be a hero. You deserve to know someone tried to destroy you and that they've been stopped. About us, I lied to you. That will never be okay. But I need you to understand why. When my mother died, I watched my father remarry someone who saw only dollar signs. I watched him become a transaction instead of a person. Since building this company, I've been pursued by people who wanted access to wealth, not access to me. Then I met you. You looked at me while running from a cockroach. You saw a person. For the first time in years, someone made me feel human. Was hiding my identity selfish? Yes. Wrong? Absolutely. But Laura, every moment with you was real. The only lie was my job title. Everything else, my feelings, my love for who you are, was truth. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for understanding. You were right. Honesty is everything. I should have trusted you with the truth. I was afraid of losing the only genuine connection I'd had in years. I lost you anyway. Fear-based decisions always fail. You deserve better than what I gave you. You deserve honesty and respect and someone brave enough to be vulnerable. I'm working on being that person. Whether you're in my life or not, with love and regret." Daniel Lara read it 3 times, then a 4th. Sophie found her at the kitchen table, surrounded by flowers that had arrived all week, holding the letter like it was something precious and painful in equal measure. "What does he say?" Sophie asked. Lara handed her the letter without words, watched Sophie's face as she read, saw the moment Sophie's expression softened. "He stopped her," Sophie said. "He protected you." "After he hurt me first," Lara said. "True," Sophie acknowledged, "but he also did it without asking for anything in return. He could have used this as leverage. Could have said, 'I'll help you if you talk to me.' Instead, he just helped." Lara looked at the flowers, at the letter, at the evidence of someone who was sorry and didn't know how else to show it. "I don't know if I can forgive him," she said. "You don't have to decide right now," Sophie said. "You don't have to decide at all. But maybe. Maybe you can just acknowledge that he's trying." That night, Laura pulled out her phone, started to type a message, deleted it, tried again, deleted again. Finally, she put the phone down, picked up the letter instead, read it one more time, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself consider that maybe, possibly, There was a path forward that didn't involve hating him forever. The ceremony. The call came 2 weeks later. Laura had spent those weeks in a strange limbo, not quite moving forward, not quite stuck, just existing in the space between what was and what might be. She'd gotten a new job, nothing spectacular, administrative work at a nonprofit that helped small businesses. The pay was modest, but the work felt meaningful. Like maybe she was building something that mattered. She hadn't contacted Daniel, hadn't responded to his letter, hadn't made any decision except the decision to not decide, to let time do what time did, heal or harden. She'd find out which. Miss Bennett? The voice on the phone was professional, excited. This is Amanda Cross from Miami Business Journal. I'm calling to inform you that you've been nominated for our Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. Laura blinked, processed. I'm sorry, what? The award recognizes individuals under 30 who've made significant contributions to Miami's business community. Your work at Ashford Industries caught our attention. The customer service restructuring you proposed. The innovative approaches to client relations. We'd like you to attend the ceremony next Friday at the Fontainebleau. Yes, of course, thank you. The line went dead. Laura sat there, phone still pressed to her ear, trying to understand what had just happened. Sophie, she yelled. Sophie! Her roommate appeared, looking concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Laura said. She was smiling, actually smiling. Something's right. For once, something's actually right. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Laura bought a dress she couldn't quite afford, navy blue and simple and perfect. Practiced a speech she probably wouldn't need to give. Told herself this was professional. Just business. Nothing to do with the fact that Daniel might be there. Except it had everything to do with that. And she knew it. And pretending otherwise felt like another kind of lie. Friday arrived with clear skies and the kind of perfect Miami weather that felt like a blessing. Laura got ready with Sophie's help, her hands shaking only a little as she applied makeup and tried to remember how to breathe. You look beautiful, Sophie said. I look terrified, Laura corrected. You can be both. The Fontainebleau was everything Laura had imagined and more. Chandeliers that probably cost more than her annual salary. People in clothes that whispered wealth. The kind of event where everyone seemed to know everyone else, and Laura felt like an imposter with better shoes. She found her name on the seating chart. Table 7. She made her way through the crowd, trying not to stare at the celebrities she recognized. The business leaders she'd read about. The kind of people who existed in a different stratosphere. That's when she saw him. Daniel stood near the bar, not in the center of attention, but on its edge. He wore a simple dark suit. No designer labels visible. No ostentatious displays of wealth. Just a man who looked like he'd forgotten how to sleep and was barely holding himself together. Their eyes met across the room. Held. Neither moved. Neither looked away. Laura's heart was doing something complicated. Something that felt like pain and hope and fear all twisted together. She should look away. Should pretend she hadn't seen him. Should focus on why she was here instead of on the man who'd broken her heart. But she couldn't. Sin could only stand there frozen as the room seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Then someone called her name. The ceremony was starting. The moment broke. Daniel looked away first. Laura found her seat, tried to focus on the speeches, the presentations, the awards for categories she barely registered. Her category was last. Of course it was last. The universe loved drama. When they called her name, she was surprised, genuinely surprised, had convinced herself she wouldn't win, that this was just recognition, not reward. Laura Bennett for outstanding innovation in marketing and client relations. She stood, walked to the stage on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, accepted the crystal trophy that was heavier than she'd expected, stood at the microphone and looked out at a room full of strangers, and then, without planning to, she spoke the truth. A year ago, I was serving coffee, she said. Today, I'm holding this. That journey wasn't smooth. It wasn't fair. It wasn't what I'd planned. She saw Daniel in the back, saw him listening with an intensity that made her chest tight. I learned something this year about betrayal and forgiveness, about the difference between the two. Sometimes people hurt us not because they're bad, but because they're afraid. Afraid of being rejected for who they are. Afraid of losing something precious. The room was silent, listening. I learned that forgiving isn't forgetting. It's choosing to move forward despite the past. It's acknowledging that people are complicated, that mistakes don't define us, that growth is possible if we're brave enough to try on. She looked at Daniel as she said it, saw him seeing her, really seeing her. For anyone who's made mistakes, it's never too late to apologize sincerely. For anyone who's been hurt, holding on to anger only hurts you. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is risk trying again. The applause was thunderous. Laura barely heard it, could only see Daniel, who was crying openly now, not caring who saw. She left the stage, went backstage where winners were supposed to wait for photos and congratulations and whatever came next. Beautiful speech. She turned. He was there, had followed her, was standing 5 feet away like he didn't quite dare come closer. Daniel, she said, just his name. Everything else felt too big for words. Can we talk? He asked. Really talk? No more lies, no more hiding, just us. Laura looked at him, at this man who'd hurt her and tried to fix it, who'd been afraid and brave and human in all the messy ways humans were. Yes, she said, we can talk. They found a quiet corner, sat on a bench that was probably worth more than her car. And for the first time since that day in the parking garage, they were honest, completely honest, about fear, about mistakes, about the ways love could survive even the worst betrayals if both people were willing to do the work. I'm sorry, Daniel said, for lying, for not trusting you, for being a coward. I'm sorry too, Laura said, for running, for not letting you explain, for being too proud to hear you. Can we try again? He asked, slowly, honestly, no more secrets. Laura thought about it, about trust and risk and the courage it took to choose hope over safety. Yes, she said finally, we can true. He took her hand, she let him, and somewhere into the space between sorry and yes, something began to heal. Trust, Laura discovered, was not something you rebuild overnight. It was constructed slowly like coral forming in deep water, layer upon careful layer. Each conversation a test. Each honesty a small victory. Each day without deception, a brick in the foundation they were laying together. Daniel took her back to the Cuban food truck where they'd first shared lunch. Same bench, same sandwiches. But this time, no pretense lived between them. No carefully constructed fiction. Just two people trying to find their way back to something that had felt right before the lies had poisoned it. Tell me about your mother, Laura said, because she realized she'd never really known. Had only heard the carefully edited version meant for the woman he thought she was. So he told her. About a woman who'd built a small tech startup in her garage. About watching her work 70-hour weeks to keep it alive. About the way cancer had taken her slowly, painfully, leaving behind a 16-year-old son and a company worth almost nothing. I was angry, Daniel said, looking at his hands. At her for dying, at my father for remarrying so fast, at the world for being unfair. So I took that anger and I turned her failing company into something she would have been proud of. Or that's what I told myself. And now, Laura asked? Now I think maybe I was trying to prove I was worth loving, he said quietly. That if I was successful enough, powerful enough, wealthy enough, someone would see me as more than a transaction. Laura reached across the space between them, took his hand. I saw you before I knew about any of that. The man who killed a cockroach and made me laugh. That's who I fell in love with. That's who I am, Daniel said. I just forgot for a while. They set rules, boundaries that felt strange and necessary. No more secrets, no matter how small. Transparency about his business, his schedule, his life. She would meet his world, but on her terms. No pretending to be someone she wasn't. No expensive makeover. No transformation into the kind of woman who belonged at galas and fundraisers. I'm a nonprofit administrator who wears clothes from outlet malls, Laura said. If that's not enough, then we should stop now. It's everything, Daniel said and meant it. The first test came a week later. A business dinner with investors from Singapore. Daniel asked if she'd come. Gave her an out if she wanted it. Made it clear this was an invitation, not an obligation. Laura went. Wore a simple black dress that cost $60 and made no apologies for it. Sat at a table where the wine probably cost more than her monthly salary and held her own in conversations about market trends and economic forecasts. The investors were impressed, not because she pretended to be something she wasn't, but because her intelligence needed no costume. Her insights needed no pedigree. She was valuable because she was herself, and that was a revelation to people used to performance. You were incredible, Daniel said afterwards, walking her to her car. I was myself, Laura corrected. That's the only thing I know how to be anymore. He kissed her then, soft and tentative. A question more than a statement. She answered by pulling him closer. by letting herself feel without fear for the first time in months. I love you, and he said against her lips. The real you, the only you. I love you too, she said, even though you're infuriating and complicated and sometimes incredibly stupid. He laughed. It was the sound of something breaking open, something light getting in. I'll take it. The redemption. 3 months into their careful rebuilding, Victoria Sinclair appeared at Laura's office. The nonprofit where Laura worked occupied the third floor of an aging building in a neighborhood gentrification had not yet discovered. The elevator was temperamental. The carpets were worn, but the work was good and the people were kind, and Laura had found something that felt like purpose. She was reviewing grant applications when the receptionist buzzed. Someone here to see you, says her name is Victoria Sinclair. Laura's first instinct was to refuse, to have security escort the woman who tried to destroy her life back to whatever expensive car she'd driven here in. But curiosity was stronger than anger, or maybe growth was stronger than grudges. Send her in. Victoria looked different, not the polished socialite from before. Her clothes were still expensive, but no longer aggressively so. Her makeup was subtle. Her entire bearing suggested someone who'd been humbled by life and was still learning how to stand upright again. Thank you for seeing me, Victoria said. She didn't sit, stood in the doorway like she expected to be dismissed at any moment. I'm not sure why I am, Laura said honestly. Because you're a better person than I am, Victoria said. That's been made very clear to me recently. She came in then, sat in the worn chair across from Laura's desk, looked at her hands like the answers might be written there. I owe you an apology, Victoria said. A real one. Not because Daniel threatened me, not because I'm afraid of legal consequences, but because what I did was unforgivable, and I need you to know I understand that. Laura waited, let the silence stretch. This was Victoria's confession. Let her work for it. I was desperate, Victoria continued. My family lost everything. Not publicly. We're very good at hiding poverty behind the right clothes and the right addresses. But privately, we're drowning. I thought marrying someone wealthy was my only option. Daniel was the best option, and when he chose you instead, I blamed you for ruining my life. You tried to destroy me, Laura said flatly. I did, Victoria acknowledged, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I've been in therapy, dealing with what that desperation did to my morality, learning that there's no excuse for what I did, only reasons, and reasons aren't enough. Laura looked at this woman who'd caused her so much pain, saw not a villain but a human being who'd made terrible choices when trapped, saw herself, if circumstances had been different, if fear had won over integrity. Why are you here, Laura asked. To apologize, and to ask if there's anything I can do to make it right. I know there isn't, but I have to ask. Laura thought about forgiveness, about the speech she'd given at the awards ceremony, about choosing grace over grudges. It would be so easy to hold on to this anger, to nurse it like a flame, to let Victoria suffer the way she'd made Laura suffer. But easy wasn't the same as right. I accept your apology, Laura said. I don't trust you. That will take time, if it ever comes. But I accept that you're sorry. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Laura said. If you're serious about making amends, I have a condition. Anything. The nonprofit I work for helps small businesses. We're always looking for people with connections, with knowledge of how wealthy families operate, with the ability to secure funding from people with money. Laura leaned forward. Use your skills for something good. Help me help people who are where you are now, desperate and trapped and making decisions they'll regret. Victoria stared at her. You'd trust me to do that? I'd give you the chance to earn trust, Laura corrected. What you do with it is up to you. Over the next months, Victoria proved herself. Slowly, carefully, she connected Laura's nonprofit with donors, helped secure grants, used her intimate knowledge of wealthy guilt to leverage contributions that changed lives. She didn't become Laura's friend, not right away, but she became an ally, and sometimes that mattered more. You didn't have to give her a second chance, Daniel said one evening, watching Victoria present at a fundraiser she'd organized. Yes, I did, Laura said. If I believe people can grow, I have to give them room to do it. Even people who hurt me, especially people who hurt me. Daniel pulled her close, kissed her temple. You make me want to be better. Good Shadi's is it, Oshigen? Because you've set a very high bar for redemption. She's just following your example. 6 months of careful rebuilding it turned into a year of solid foundation. Laura moved out of Sophie's apartment and into a place of her own, small but hers. Daniel helped with furniture but didn't try to buy his way into her life. Just showed up with a toolbox and a willingness to assemble IKEA shelves without complaining about the instructions. They found a rhythm. Dinners at both expensive restaurants and food trucks. Walks on the beach and nights at the opera. A blending of worlds that sometimes clashed but more often complemented. He introduced her to his circle with quiet pride. She introduced him to hers with cautious hope. Sophie and Marcus had started dating, which added another layer of complexity and joy. Double dates became regular occurrences. Holidays involved coordinating 4 schedules instead of 2. It was messy and wonderful and felt like building a life instead of just living one. Daniel knew he wanted to ask her, had known for months. But the asking required courage he was still building, required faith that she wouldn't see it as pressure or expectation, required trusting that they'd done enough healing for forever to feel possible. Marcus found him in his office on a Thursday afternoon, staring at a small velvet box like it held the secrets of the universe. "You're really doing this," Marcus said. "I'm really doing this," Daniel confirmed. "And you're not going to do anything dramatic? No flash mob? No skywriting?" "God, no," Daniel said. "She'd kill me, then refuse on principle." "So what's the plan?" Daniel smiled. It was soft. Sure, the smile of a man who'd learned something important. "The same place we had our first real date. The food truck, the bench, where we were just 2 people without complications." "That's actually perfect," Marcus said, sounding surprised. "Don't act so shocked," Daniel said. "I've learned a few things." Saturday came with perfect weather and butterflies in Daniel's stomach that felt like they were trying to escape. He picked up Laura at noon, casual clothes and no hint of what was coming. They drove to the food truck, ordered sandwiches, sat on their bench. Laura was talking about work, about a small business they'd just helped secure funding, about the owner's face when she'd gotten the news. Daniel listened with half his attention, the other half focused on the weight in his pocket, the question burning in his chest. "You're quiet," Laura observed, studying him. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," Daniel said. "Actually better than perfect." He stood. Laura looked confused, started to ask what he was doing, then saw him kneel on the concrete in front of the bench, people walking past with sandwiches and not pretending not to stare. "Oh my God," Laura said. "Laura Bennett," Daniel began, and his voice only shook a little. "A year ago, you jumped into my arms because of a cockroach. It was the best moment of my life, and I didn't even know it yet." She was crying, smiling, her hand over her mouth like she could hold in the joy. "I've learned a lot this year, about honesty, about fear, about what it means to really love someone instead of the idea of them. You taught me all of it. You made me better. You make me want to keep being better." He pulled out the ring. Simple, elegant, a sapphire because she'd mentioned once that diamonds felt too obvious. Because he'd remembered. Because the details mattered. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. I can promise I'll be honest about them. I can't promise life will be easy. I can promise to face the hard parts together. I can't promise perfect, but I can promise real and true and forever, if you'll have me." He took a breath, let it out, asked the question that felt like jumping off a cliff and hoping for wings. "Will you marry me?" Laura was fully crying now. People had stopped pretending not to watch. The food truck owner had come out to see what was happening. The whole world had contracted to this moment on a sidewalk in Miami where everything had started. "Yes," Laura said. "Yes, you impossible, wonderful, infuriating man. Yes." He slipped the ring on her finger. Stood. Pulled her into a kiss that tasted like tears and joy and Cuban sandwiches and everything good in the world. The small crowd that had gathered applauded. Someone whistled. The food truck owner yelled congratulations in Spanish. "I love you," Daniel said against her lips. "I love you too," Laura said, "even when you make me cry in public." "Especially when I make you cry in public," he corrected. They stayed on that bench for another hour, watching people and planning futures and existing in the strange space between proposal and marriage, where everything felt possible, where the past had been survived and the future was waiting. "Small wedding," Laura said firmly. "Your garden, just people who matter." "Whatever you want," Daniel said. "I want you," she said simply. "The rest is just details." The wedding happened on a Saturday in October, when Miami's weather had finally remembered it was allowed to be beautiful. Daniel's garden had been transformed into something from a dream. String lights, wildflowers, a simplicity that felt more expensive than ostentation because it took restraint to achieve. 100 people gathered, not the society event Victoria could have planned, not the small family affair Laura had first imagined. Something in between, a blending that felt right. Rachel from Ashford Industries sat next to Sophie. Marcus stood as best man. Victoria, in an act of grace that still surprised everyone, had offered to help coordinate and then stepped back to let others have the spotlight. Laura got ready in Daniel's house with Sophie fussing over her hair and her mother on speakerphone, offering advice from across the country. "You look beautiful," Sophie said, stepping back to admire her work. Laura looked in the mirror, saw herself in a simple dress that had cost less than some people's car payments and felt like exactly enough. Her hair was down, her makeup was light. She looked like herself, just elevated, just ready. "I'm getting married," she said to her reflection. "You're getting married," Sophie confirmed, "to a man who loves you enough to let you be yourself. That's rarer than you think." The ceremony started at 4. Laura walked down the aisle on Sophie's arm, having no father to give her away and needing no permission except her own. Daniel waited at the gazebo, trying not to cry and failing spectacularly. Marcus handed him a tissue without comment. The officiant was a woman who'd married them in spirit long before she married them in law. Someone who understood that this wasn't just a legal binding, but a sacred promise between two people who'd earned each other. "We're here today," she began, "to witness a miracle, not the miracle of two people falling in love. That happens every day. But the miracle of two people choosing each other after seeing the worst, after surviving betrayal, after learning that love is not the absence of mistakes, but the presence of forgiveness." Daniel's vows came first. He'd written them himself, refused help, worked on them for weeks until they felt true. "Laura, I loved you when I was lying about who I was. I love you more now that I can be honest. You taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness, that letting someone see your scars is braver than hiding them. I promise to be honest even when it's hard, to trust you even when I'm afraid, to love you not despite your flaws but because of them, because they make you real, because real is all I ever wanted." Laura's vows made the entire garden weep. "Daniel, when I met you, you were just the guy who killed a cockroach. Now you're the man who kills my fears, who believes in me when I don't believe in myself, who makes me brave enough to be soft. I promise to trust you even when trust is terrifying, to grow with you instead of apart from you, to remind you who you are when you forget, to love you on your worst days and your best days and all the boring ones in between, because that's what marriage is, choosing someone over and over, every day, forever." The rings were exchanged, simple gold bands that felt like promises made solid. The kiss was sweet and deep and witnessed by everyone who mattered. "I present to you," the officiant said with obvious joy, "Daniel and Laura Ashford." The reception was everything a wedding should be, food trucks instead of caterers, a playlist instead of a band, string lights and laughter, and the kind of joy that didn't require expense to feel extravagant. They danced their first dance to a song Laura had chosen. Something about taking chances, about choosing love despite fear. Daniel held her close and wondered how he'd gotten this lucky, how life had given him a second chance when he hadn't deserved it. "What are you thinking?" Laura asked, her head on his shoulder. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," Daniel said. "Good answer," Laura said, "but also kind of cliché." "Fine, I'm thinking about how I'm going to mess this up and how you're going to forgive me and how we're going to keep choosing each other anyway." "Much better," Laura said. "More honest." "I'm learning," Daniel said. 3 years later, on a Saturday morning that felt like a gift, Daniel was working on his laptop in bed while Laura, 8 months pregnant, was reading beside him. The baby kicked. Laura gasped. Daniel put his hand on her belly and felt his daughter moving, and his heart did something complicated. "She's going to be a soccer player," Laura said. "She's going to be perfect," Daniel corrected. "She's going to be a person," Laura said, "with her own dreams and fears, and probably a healthy dose of both our stubborn genes." "God help us," Daniel said, but he was smiling. The scream came from downstairs, high-pitched, terrified, the kind of sound that activated every parental instinct even though their child wasn't born yet. They looked at each other, moved as one unit toward the stairs despite Laura's protestations that she was fine. She could move fast, stop treating her like she was fragile. In the living room, they found the source of the terror, A cockroach, enormous, bold, walking across the floor like it owned the place. For a moment, they both froze, looked at each other, and started laughing. Deep belly laughs that hurt, that released years of tension. That acknowledged the absurdity and perfection of this moment. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Laura asked. That this is somehow perfect, Daniel said. Exactly. He grabbed a magazine, approached the cockroach with the exaggerated caution of someone facing an old enemy. Laura watched with her hand on her belly, laughing too hard to help. One swift movement. Silence. My hero, Laura said, just like she'd said 3 years ago in a cafe that felt like another lifetime. Always, Daniel said. They stood there in their living room, holding each other, laughing at the cosmic joke that had started everything, the cockroach that had brought them together, the fear that had made her jump, the arms that had caught her. We should tell her about this, Laura said, patting her belly. When she's old enough. How her parents met because of a bug. She'll be so embarrassed, Daniel said. Good, Laura said. Kids should be embarrassed by their parents. It builds character. That night, they sat in the nursery they'd painted together. Pale yellow walls because they wanted sunshine. A crib Daniel had built with his own hands because some things mattered more than convenience. A rocking chair that had been Laura's grandmother's, refinished and waiting. Are you scared? Laura asked. Terrified, Daniel admitted. Of being a bad father. Of messing her up. Of not knowing what I'm doing. Good, Laura said. Fear means you care. Means you'll try. That's all kids really need. Parents who try. When did you get so wise? Daniel asked. I've always been wise, Laura said. You were just too busy pretending to be a supply coordinator to notice. Are you ever going to let me live that down? Daniel asked. Never, Laura said cheerfully. I'm going to tell that story at her wedding and her children's weddings. It's my legacy. I created a monster, Daniel said. You created a wife, Laura corrected. Same thing. 3 weeks later, Emma Rose Ashford was born, small and perfect and screaming her arrival to a world that had been waiting for her. Daniel held her for the first time and cried like he'd never cried before. Tears of joy and terror and overwhelming love for this tiny human who depended on him for everything. She's perfect, he whispered. She's ours, Laura said, exhausted and radiant. That's better than perfect. The years passed the way they do, quickly and slowly at the same time. Emma grew, started walking, started talking, developed a personality that was equal parts Laura's determination and Daniel's thoughtfulness, with a stubborn streak that belonged entirely to herself. On Emma's 3rd birthday, they were having cake in the garden when she spotted a bug on the patio. Mommy, she said, pointing. Bug? Laura and Daniel exchanged a look. Are you scared of bugs, sweetie? Laura asked. Emma considered this seriously. No, bugs are small. I'm big. That's right, Daniel said. You're very big. Emma walked closer to the cockroach, bent down to examine it with the fearless curiosity of someone who didn't know bugs were supposed to be frightening. Mommy, why do people not like bugs? Some people are scared of things that are different, Laura said, things they don't understand. But Mommy was scared of a bug when she met Daddy, Emma said with the matter-of-fact tone of someone reciting a well-known story. And she jumped on him. That's right, Daniel said, pulling Laura close. Best day of my life. Because you met Mommy? Emma asked. Because I caught your mommy, Daniel said, and I never let her go. Emma thought about this. I would catch Mommy too, if she was falling. We'll always catch each other, Laura said. That's what family does. The cockroach, oblivious to the significance of its presence, continued its journey across the patio. Emma watched it go without fear, without judgment, just curious about this small creature sharing her world. Goodbye, bug, she called after it. Thank you for making my mommy meet my daddy. That night, after Emma was in bed, Daniel and Laura stood in the garden where they'd been married. String lights still hung from the trees. The gazebo still stood as a monument to promises kept. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Laura asked. If I hadn't jumped, if you'd told me the truth sooner, if any of it had gone differently. Every day, Daniel said, but I think we ended up exactly where we were supposed to be. Even with all the pain? Laura asked. Especially with all the pain, Daniel said. The pain made us careful with each other, made us appreciate what we have, made us work for something instead of just falling into it. When did you get so wise? Laura asked, echoing his question from years before. I married well, Daniel said. Above them, the stars were coming out, Miami's sky was never truly dark, too much light pollution for that. But on clear nights like this, you could see enough to remember that the universe was vast and indifferent, and somehow, impossibly, had arranged for two people to find each other in a city of millions. All because of a cockroach. All because of fear and courage in equal measure. All because sometimes the best love stories start with a leap of faith into the arms of a stranger who turns out to be exactly who you needed all along. I love you, Laura said into the darkness. I love you too, Daniel said, even when you remind me about the supply coordinator thing. Especially then, Laura said. And somewhere in the garden, another cockroach made its way across the stones, unaware that it was carrying on a legacy, that it represented second chances and honest mistakes and the kind of love that survives anything because it chooses to, the kind of love worth jumping for, the kind worth catching, the kind that begins always in the most unexpected ways. The end.